Okay, fresh off a big victory by the Rutgers Scarlet Knights over last year's runner-up in the national championship game, Washington Huskies, on a blackout Friday night. We'll do a little bit of a Big Ten recap and preview what will be coming up this week. So let's get to it. Okay, Rutgers coming off a big win, and we're 4-0 for the first time since 2012. We travel in to Nebraska, Lincoln, Nebraska, for what's shaping up to be a pretty big game. But before we get to that, let's recap what we saw over this past weekend. Illinois and Penn State, I guess, was the marquee game in the Big Ten on Saturday. And it was, not surprisingly, although maybe a little bit surprisingly, a kind of nip and tuck, kind of tight physical game. Illinois had beat Penn State, whenever it was, a couple years ago. So you think, okay, maybe there's something with a division rivalry that gives them a little juice. I watched this game, and I was surprised that it was kind of this tight. Illinois has been playing very well. Brent Bielema's got them playing well, but I don't know if they're for real or not. But they hung in there with Penn State. Penn State probably should have won by a bigger score. We know what that's like. But their defense is a top-flight defense. Luke Altmaier, everybody's favorite flavor of the week when it comes to quarterbacks, was 16 to 20, kind of average kind of game. 16, 26, 185 yards, one touchdown, one interception. Penn State's defense, very good. Illinois only had 43 yards rushing, and if we are to foreshadow our matchup with Illinois, which is looking like it's going to be the big matchup that we didn't expect at the beginning of the season, it's going to be kind of a similar game. It's going to be a little bit physical. Our quarterbacks are almost like mirror images of each other because they're not big, fancy, strong-arm athletes who are going to throw it downfield and run it all the time. They're game managers that are accurate, know where they want to go with the ball, have good ball placement, and they're not going to make mistakes. This is going to be a really interesting game when Illinois plays Rutgers at the end of the season. And if Illinois doesn't fade down the stretch, who would have thought that this could be a big game? I think our running game gives us the edge, but it's going to be a tough game. Nonetheless, Illinois covers. Penn State was a 19.5-point favorite, surprisingly. Illinois did give up 5 sacks, but Penn State's defense is considerably more aggressive and gets much more penetration than ours does, so I don't know how that translates. Illinois had 2 sacks. I'm not really worried about their pass rush against Ethan, but nonetheless, it's going to be a dogfight, and we'll see how that game shapes up later in the year. Illinois probably going to go to, what are they, 4-1 now? So they're probably going to be 5-1 because they have Purdue, who's really struggling this year. A little bit of a surprise. Purdue struggling a whole bunch. Penn State should be continuing their winning ways because they go to UCLA, and UCLA is having a tough time of it. Who knew? You knew they want to play defense. The offense isn't great, but they're really struggling. So Penn State will likely be 5-0, 6-0, whatever they're going to be. And then Illinois likely to be 5-1. Minnesota, USC, and Wisconsin. I kind of said in my preview last week, this might be a tougher game than you might think for USC, and initially it was. Wisconsin's actually up 21-10 at halftime, which is kind of a surprise that Wisconsin could put up 21 points that quickly. USC comes back and they do what those big or those Pac-10 teams do, and they kind of put the points on the board pretty quickly. You know, Wisconsin's Wisconsin, man. Luke Fickell hasn't been able to get that passing game going. They had 285 total yards, and I'm feeling more confident Wisconsin, even though they've always given us a problem. They want to run it, play defense, throw the ball down the field historically over the past couple of years. With Longo, they want to open it up more in the passing game. Doesn't seem like it's working all that well. It's just not clicking. 13 of 26, 180 yards, a touchdown and interception. That's like old school 1960s, early 1970s Big Ten passing attack. 105 yards rushing, not too daunting. I feel that our chances are really good against Wisconsin. I feel our running game is better. Believe it or not, our passing game is a little better. We should have won. Last year we lost, I think it was 23-14, and Gavin had 3 really big moments in the red zone against top tier Big Ten teams last year that kind of lost the game for us. That's shifted the momentum, and that was one of those games was against Wisconsin. I'm not a determinist. I don't feel that, okay, now we've taken the next step to catch up, but I feel we stand a pretty good chance. Moss, again, I said last week when they lost to Michigan, if you're throwing 51, 53 times, whatever it was, in a game, you're most likely going to lose unless it's a Big 12 game from the 90s or early 2000s or something. Moss was 30 of 45, so he had 53 attempts last week, 45 this week, 308 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. I just feel to be an elite level, top tier Big Ten kind of team, even though Michigan's taken a step back this year somewhat, you're going to have to be a little more of a physical, a little more balance between run and pass. It might work against mid-level to lower-level Big Ten teams, but they did pull out a 38-21 win, so who am I to talk? And they did rush for like 150, 160 yards. So they were able to put some yards and points up against Wisconsin, who historically wants to play physical, wants to play tough. But again, USC, the Pac-12 style, not physical, no sacks, 0 sacks against a Wisconsin team that just doesn't pass the ball very well and is not very explosive. So I like our chances. We have opportunities. I think Washington and USC are not that far apart offensively. Maybe Washington might be a little slightly better, to be honest with you. And the philosophy would be the same. If we can keep things in front of you with USC, kind of not give up those big chunk yards and not get gashed in the running game, we have a pretty good chance against USC, even though we have to travel coast to coast, then most people would give us a chance for us. So that's going to be interesting. USA is probably going to go to 5-1. They go to Minnesota, who is playing better this year and played well today, but they can't get to the next level. I think they're 2-2 now. USC will probably be 5-1 after next week, and Wisconsin's next game, it's probably going to be a win for them. They play Purdue. Michigan, Minnesota. This game started out with Michigan sprinting ahead and having a big lead, and then Minnesota once again comes back, makes it a tight game. They're playing better, but as 500 kind of mid-level mediocre teams kind of do, they just can't find ways to win and don't know how to win. This was a game of bad offense. These teams just don't. They just can't. They can't generate enough offense. Minnesota had 296 total yards. And Michigan, 241 total yards. And they won. And 155 of them were on the ground. And they had a 21-3 halftime lead. Almost gave it up. And I think that's what happens when you run the ball a lot and you're not getting the big plays. You're not getting those breakaway plays, those chunk plays, and your passing game doesn't have enough juice to keep the defense off balance. And, Minnesota made a game of it, 27-24. Next week, this is going to be a really good matchup. It's not a big, sexy game as far as national news is concerned, but I'm going to be fascinated to watch Michigan versus Washington and whether Washington's explosive offense and passing game and their rushing game matches up well against the Michigan team who just wants to run it. They're going to pass it minimally and wants to play defense. Let's see what happens here in this game. That's going to be fascinating to watch. Minnesota, they're probably going to go to 2-3. They have to go to USC. That's going to be a tough game. They're not going to be able to match the scoring or the offense. The biggest surprise in the Big Ten, and they keep on chugging along, Curt Cignetti. Who knew? This kind of pisses me off in a way. Here's a team that's 5-0 for the first time since 1967. I'm 8 years old. That was the last time that Indiana was 5-0, and they're making it look easy. They beat Maryland 42-28. Beat them by 2 touchdowns. And Maryland and Indiana, you can kind of throw us in there, and those mid-level teams that you're trying to figure out who they are, how well they're going to play, and are they the real deal? Are they going to make progress? Maryland without Tagliavoa, thought might take a step back, but they've been playing well. They played pretty well offensively against Indiana, and Indiana kind of plays like a Big 12, Pac-12 kind of team. They're scoring, but their defense is kind of vulnerable. Rutgers, 22 of 33, 359 yards, 3 touchdowns, a couple picks. So there's opportunities when you throw the ball up that much to make some plays and stop some drive. But they did have 151 yards rushing. And that's kind of the big surprise. When you have, almost 500 yards rushing, 500 yards total, and I was surprised to learn this, that Indiana is number 1 in the Big Ten in rushing. You don't think about Indiana, you think about Michigan, maybe Ohio State or Penn State. But Indiana has that balance. Elite passing game, elite rushing game, and they're putting the ball in the end zone. This is gonna, I don't know how this is gonna wind up in the future for us. I think if Indiana continues to play that style, they could be one of those 6-6, 7-5, maybe 8-4 teams that scores a lot, but really can't stop anybody. Edwards from Maryland had a pretty good game, 26 of 41, 284 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a pick. And they had 115 yards rushing, so it's not like Indiana can steamroll over you. But you're going to have to play some defense, and I think our style of play, wanting to grind down the clock, run the ball, be physical, might be a better matchup for Indiana than some of the other teams they faced this year. But nonetheless, Indiana is going to have they're going to go to, they're going to be 6-0. They play Northwestern next week, and I get it. You never know. You always have those upsets. Yesterday, Ole Miss loses to Kentucky. Gavin Wimsatt, I think he had 8 or 9 rushes for 28 yards, but he's part of a big win. Nonetheless, both teams' next game is Northwestern, so there should be some wins there for both Indiana and Maryland, Ohio State, Michigan State. close early. Ohio State seems to be having those kind of games where the games are always close early and then they just, in the second half or midway through the second quarter, they just start to pick up steam and blow you away. This is an impressive team. 38-7 over Michigan State. This was a rivalry game that never really had much of a chance. Ohio State had almost 500 yards. Michigan State, I guess you can hang your hat on that they were kind of hanging early, but when you're all jazzed up and you have the energy and play here or there has the potential to change the momentum of the game, they couldn't take advantage of and wind up just getting blown out. Charles, didn't have a terrible game. 13 to 19, 167 yards. And a touchdown. However, they had 48 yards rushing. And you can't win in the Big Ten with only 48 yards rushing. So as far as our matchup in the future with Michigan State, I think we have opportunities to have success against them both in the passing game and the running game. But we can't allow Michigan State to have that game where they find their juice in the running game and gash us for some chunk yards to kind of stay in the game and hang around or make it a close game like the past couple of years. So not much to take out of that game. As we have with the next couple games, and that's Oregon over UCLA. No surprise there. 34-13, UCLA is losing virtually these games that they lose. They're losing by 3 touchdowns. They're not very competitive. Kind of a surprise. They want to play defense. They're not great on offense, but you think they can be gritty and hang in there. Transfer Dylan Gabriel, 31 of 41, 280 yards, 3 touchdowns. And they had 153 yards rushing. That's kind of what Oregon does. They're going to have 250 yards passing. They're going to have 150 yards rushing. They're going to roll up those yards. UCLA, no offense. They had 176 total yards, 118 yards passing, which is kind of old school Big Ten. If it was 1967, you can get away with that. But when you have 24 rushes for 53 yards and you're averaging 2 yards a carry, that ain't going to get it done. I'm liking our matchup against them more and more. I kind of figured that, Pac-12 team. This was before the season started. That's not that big explosive team, but has good recruiting classes and is looking to play better offense and already has had a very good defense. I kind of like our chances. We can't let that game be a trap game. We have to go out there and we have to beat them and we have to take care of business. Which leads us to Nebraska and Purdue, and this previews our game coming up this coming Saturday in Lincoln, Nebraska. Nebraska beats Purdue 28-10. This game was close, and I've said this before a couple of times. The matchup with Nebraska kind of worried me. I felt that, they want to play defense. They match up well against us. Dylan Raiola is a quarterback, big, strong pocket passer who can make all the passes and get the ball into windows he needs to get to. That was kind of the missing element for Nebraska. Otherwise, I think we would have matched up very well against them. This game was like 3-0. Late into the third quarter, but Nebraska went on a run, pulled away 128-10, and that's something we can't allow Nebraska to do when we face them. Hold them down, first down, second down, third down, hold them down for a quarter, 2 quarters, and then let them get on a roll and get some rhythm. Dylan Raiola had a typical Dylan Raiola kind of game, 17 of 27, 257 yards. 1 touchdown, no interceptions, very solid. He's solid every game. And they want to be able to run the ball, and they ran the ball well, 161 yards rushing. On defense, they have a good defense, although they can be vulnerable at times. They had 5 sacks, so that's something we have to be aware of and game plan around that. We talked about last game against Washington and their good defense, how I was looking for quick hitters, slant plays underneath to get balls to our playmakers underneath. That may be a strategy. Not sure how effective we'll be against the run, we'll be able to run it against them. I think it'll be similar to Washington. You know, Kyle, we get stopped for a yard, 2 yards, 3 yards, and then he breaks one off. If we can get enough big plays, enough chunk plays, control the ball enough. Dylan Raiola, watching him, he is going to be the best pocket passer that we see this year. Now, I know Will Rogers kind of carved us up, but he's that rhythmic sort of, air raid, ball placement, accuracy kind of quarterback, but he doesn't have the physical tools that Dylan Raiola does. So Dylan Raiola is kind of like the Dan Marino of Nebraska. Big, strong guy, good arm, good ball placement. Going to have a lot of juice on the ball when he throws it. Throws a little high, because he's got that good arm. But he also can be prodded into and forced into mistakes if you pressure him, make him move. Not that he's immobile, but he's going to try and let his physical skills and throw that ball in a place that's not necessarily good ball placement if you're forcing him out of his comfort zone. Again, that's going to take us being able to get pressure and get him to the ground. It's not going to be easy. You're not going to be able to physical guy. I don't know if you can get him to the ground, but if you can, hit him, get some pressures and just disrupt his game a little bit, and we can tip some passes, get an interception. That'll be helpful. He's not going to carve us up like Will Rogers, but I expect him to make some passes. But I feel we have a decent chance against them. We just can't let him hit receivers downfield wide open. We've had some issues this year with receivers being wide open downfield. So we need to be a little tighter. We need to get pressure. Maybe we disguise some blitzes and bring the unexpected, because this is a guy, if you leave somebody open downfield, there's no question about it, he's going to hit him. So we'll have a preview on this game coming up in a couple days. But to me, this is the bellwether game with two programs kind of in the same spot. Mid-level programs that have visions of grandeur and wanting to take the next step. Nebraska, getting 5-star Dylan Raiola as a transfer out of Georgia, was expected to take that next step. Now, they've underperformed a bit in many prognosticators' eyes, and I kind of agree, having watched them, but in the end, they pull these games out and they win. We're going to have to be gritty, determined, and we're going to have to be able to execute and take advantage of plays on the field and not leave them there like we had against Virginia Tech and Washington. Big Ten, doing pretty well. We have 7 teams ranked in the top 25. We have Ohio State at number 3. We got Oregon number 6, Penn State number 9, Michigan number 10, USC number 11, Indiana 23, and Illinois 24, despite a loss, but it was a tough loss. Rutgers gets 7 votes for the top 25. For those of you who keep asking, will Rutgers get top 25 votes? They got 7. Have to say, it's 6 votes less than James Madison got. Everybody enjoy your week. We'll have a Rutgers-Nebraska preview, and we'll talk to you in the next game. Let's go, Rutgers. Oh, by the way, this past Saturday night was part of a charity wine, spirits, craft beer charity event at Bellworks in Homedale, and Eric Legrand was a guest of honor. He had a table there sampling his terrific Eric LeGrand Bourbon, which we've talked about. There's a new bottling coming out, released November. Not available. Had a chance to try a little something with it the other night on the down low, and it's really fabulous. So keep an eye on that. I'll try to give you guys a heads up on that. Nonetheless, cheers to Eric. Cheers to Rutgers football and a 4-0 start for the first time since 2012. And we will see you the next time. Happy Sunday night, everybody.